Do you remember the infamous episode 17?
The lost episode?
The lost episode, the well and truly lost episode. The one with all the brilliant ideas in it?
Yes. Yes. Well, actually, no, that was part of the problem.
Yes,
Is
okay.
that we don't actually remember that episode.
Right. Exactly. Here's the deal. One of the discussions we had in episode 17 was a little side discussion about the various appearances and disappearances of my writing utensils, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're gonna revisit that discussion that nobody has heard but us.
Okay.
Because the other day I got really frustrated.
Okay. This in itself is not unusual.
No, this is not unusual. That's kind of my ground state most of the time. But in this case, I was frustrated because one of my pens I was using ran out of ink.
Okay.
And I picked up another pen to use it, and it also was out of ink.
I see.
So I picked up a third pen to use it, and guess what? It was out of ink too.
Sounds like you had a very trying time, sir.
So then I went to a pencil.
And it was out of ink.
Whose lead was broken.
I assume a mechanical pencil.
Yes. Well, no. This is the regular, sharpen it in a sharpener pencil. Lead was broken. I thought, I'm sitting here, I'm trying to get this idea written down so I don't forget it in the middle of doing everything else. And I can't, none of these pens or pencils or nothing are working. I did try some mechanical pencils, which I had on hand, and those were pathetic and whatnot. So all right. I finally eventually got a Sharpie and just wrote it big as brass on a piece of paper so I couldn't possibly forget it or lose it or anything like that, right?
Uh-huh.
And then I stopped and I went through all my pens and pencils and threw out everything that was out of ink, out of lead, or in some other way non-functional, pencils without erasers, et cetera, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I consolidated things. I pulled all the little bits of leads out of the mechanical pencils I was throwing away, just little cheapy plastic jobbers, right? Dollar store mechanical pencils. Checked to make sure that I held on to my favorite pen bodies, the ones that I really liked and all that stuff. And then threw the ink cartridges out of those and all this stuff, right? Organized everything down to the point where I had exactly one pen that worked and one mechanical pencil that worked. And I thought to myself, this is ridiculous. Even just at one of each that work, I'm still going to be running out at some date. So I thought, all right, I will go online and I will order some more of these pens, because what I have is a, this will mean maybe nothing to you, but it's a Papermate 2-heart pen. I don't know what its official name is, but that's how you find them online, is Paperweight 2-heart. This one is a stainless steel pen, so it's got a very nice stainless steel body on it and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, I'll just get some more of these because I like these. They feel good in the hand. They got good weight and all that kind of stuff, right?
Right. Okay.
They don't make these anymore. They haven't made these since about the mid-'80s, apparently. So now I'm in a situation where I know I need more pens. But now I don't have a pen I can just order and get without going to great amounts of difficulty and trouble and visiting eBay and all that kind of stuff. So then I start looking, all right, what did they replace it with? Maybe that one's comparable. Is there another company that makes a similar pen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? You know how you do that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I eventually gave up on that for the time being. And I went to the mechanical pencil that I saved, which is in some ways very similar to the pen. It's a narrow body. It's got a good weight to it. It feels good to write with. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
This pen is a Faber, I can never tell how it's supposed to be pronounced. Faber-Castell Colormatics mechanical pencil. I thought, well, I'll just order some more of these. Guess what? They don't make those anymore either, and haven't for some time. So now I'm really stuck. Well, what am I going to do? So I realize this is a fascinating story, and most of you would much rather wait for the movie adaptation of it, but, bear with me. I started going to websites that talk I started going to websites that talk about, pens and whatnot, trying to see what gets good reviews, what pens might have qualities that I want in a pen. And I eventually ended up with a mechanical pencil and a ballpoint pen, both made by Rotring. These are all metal bodies. They are machined brass bodies.
Uh-huh.
And have knurled grips at the end, not plastic or rubber or anything like that, but knurled. You know what I mean by knurled, right?
Like nubbed?
Kind of. It's like you know how like a nail file feels?
Oh yeah, it's got like that the crisscrossy little
crisscrossy, crosshatchy
little cross. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So that's the grip part of the pen, and these are very sturdy pens, very nice. And the mechanical pencil is exactly the same way. I will link to these because these are actually, I really, really, really like these. They are very impressively made. I think it's it's either a French or a German company that makes them. This Rotring.
Okay.
And I will link to these. These are really, like I say, really good. I'm very impressed with these things. But the secondary and unexpected problem I ran into in acquiring these, which I now have in my hand, is that I accidentally mentioned the fact to my father that I was getting some new pens pens and pencils to replace things that I had thrown out. And the words came out of his mouth that have started me down a rabbit hole I can't get out of.
Okay.
Well, we used to use fountain pens all the time when I was a kid. And I was like, yes, I know, Dad. But technology has advanced since then. And he said, no, we still have them. I said, you still have them? Yeah. So he goes into where his little hidey hole is, or whatever it is. And he pulls out a handful of fountain pens that are about 40 or 50 years old.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Well, those things, they do last forever.
Oh, they do last. Yeah, absolutely. They do last forever. I know, because once I started cleaning them out after an hour and a half, 2 hours of researching exactly which ones they were, just to satisfy my own curiosity, a couple of them still wrote.
Huh.
And I tried them out. And they're good. They're really, really good. I have now ordered ink. I have ordered paper that is of a higher quality than standard notebook paper, which is what I had.
Right.
Because fountain pens will bleed right through that if you're not really careful.
Yeah. Also takes some practice to use them, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I am now. I'm researching fountain pens. I'm researching inks. I'm researching various kinds of paper. I'm stuck, sir. My ink shows up Monday. It even got to the point where I decided if this Rotring pen had one fault, it was that it was in blue ink and you couldn't get it in black.
Uh-huh.
So I then researched what cartridges for black ink will fit in this pen. And I ended up with this thing from Schmidt. It's an Easy Flow, made in Germany, etc., etc. As good as this pen was before I changed cartridges, it is a bazillion times better after changing cartridges. Because this ink is very, very smooth. It's like writing on ice. It's so smooth. So there you go. That is my new obsession, is fountain pens.
Because again, you don't just get interested in something.
No. I could tell you all kinds of things about fountain pens now.
Please don't.
I could tell you about my dad's Schaefer fountain pen from about 1948, 49 with the Triumph nib on it. I could tell you about the Pilot 21 that he's got. You see what the problem is, right?
Yeah, I do. I'm just not sure that you and I agree as to what the problem is.
I know more than I want to know. But now that I know it, I have
choice.
Yeah, now that I know it, I have to put it into action. You see, knowledge is no good if you don't do anything with it. So I'm going to be obsessed with fountain pens for a little while, I've decided. Apparently.
Yeah, actually, Tiny warned me that we would be discussing this tonight.
Oh, she did. She must have seen the things I put up on Twitter.
Yeah, she pays more attention to Twitter than I do.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be honest. I'm thinking of just quitting Twitter altogether.
Right.
It's no longer doing anything for me.
Mm-mm.
And I barely pay attention to it anymore. But while you were having your very harrowing experience with pens that don't have ink, which is where this all started.
Right.
And I understand how emotional that was for you. I'm going to give a little bit of a personal update because I realized that I haven't updated a lot of people in what's going on with me. I had an MRI of my knee.
Oh.
Well, actually, I got the results. No, I guess, it's going to be 2 weeks later when people actually hear this.
Right. Everything's all over and done with by now.
Yeah, well, here's hoping. So, I managed somehow, and I don't know how, because I did not have any sort of injury. Did not have any sort of fall or bump or bruise or whatever. I have managed to partially dislocate my knee.
Huh.
That's what's been going on. And because I haven't been taking care of it, it's been getting worse, but that's not all. So, like in a knee, obviously you have the two bones that come together.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a sort of void where the two bones come together.
Mm-hmm.
And protecting the joint there, because all sorts of stuff runs through that joint, like nerves and blood vessels and stuff, and they run through grooves in the bone.
Right.
To get from the upper leg to the lower leg. So protecting that, there was a little dome of bone called your kneecap, your patella, right? That's what your kneecap actually is.
Right.
It's just
a little cap that sits on your knee.
Right, and it floats there, except it's held in place by these by tendons.
Mm-hmm.
And mine is no longer sitting in its little gap. It has been pulled off to the side, or it was pulled off to the side, and now it's kind of out of place. And I don't know, I'm going to go see an orthopedist and find out what they're going to do with it, but the orthopedist can't see me for a few days yet, so. But the other thing is that underneath it, providing a little bit of a cushion, is a little disc of fatty tissue. And my little disc of fatty tissue is sitting against my important leg nerve. And it's rubbing on that little nerve. That's what's been shooting all these weird feelings, tingles, and weaknesses and instabilities up and down my leg. So I messed up my knee pretty bad, and I have no idea how.
It's a miracle.
Right? It just sort of happened one day.
You sound a lot like my dad, who has this similar problem with his back, where he wakes up in the morning not having done anything, and his back is all out of whack.
Yeah, well, that's basically what started to happen. I was starting to get like occasional knee pain, and I'm like, oh, it's just knee, it's like it's sore, and that's when I was trying to get back into jogging again.
Mm-hmm.
Was when I started. So I'm like, oh, okay, it's probably from jogging and stuff, but it was gradually getting worse until it became constant. And finally, I'm like, well, I guess I should talk to the doctor about this now, since it's pretty much every day. And the doctor, well, I had I think I told you privately about the fascinating conversation I had with my not doctor.
Yes.
Okay. So, like most people in America now, I don't see my doctor. I see my doctor's nurse practitioner, who then takes care of most of the day-to-day stuff, and then it gets reviewed by the doctor. So I see Nurse Eric.
Okay.
And now, I like Nurse Eric. He's good at what he does. He listens to me. He takes me seriously. I recently told him exactly what to prescribe to me. Well, my blood pressure was being elevated again. And so I told him, and because now I can't exercise, and I've had blood pressure problems for a while, so I told him, listen, I know my blood pressure is elevated. It's been elevated my last 3 visits. So why don't we put me back on another blood pressure medication? And he's like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I really want to get you off of it in the long run. I'm like, yeah, me too. But for now, I'm going to need something else to keep everything down because it's getting elevated. And he's like, yeah, well, look, we could talk about that. And I'm like, yeah, just put me on metoprolol. I'm gonna need a beta blocker. I'm already on a calcium channel. I take a joint.
Right.
It doesn't matter what I'm on already.
You take a joint. That's all anybody needs to know.
Yeah, I take a joint a day for my blood pressure. No, it's a joint medication. It's got a couple of different blood pressure medication. So
Right.
So I'm talking about, like, listen, I'm already doing the this and that, so I'm gonna need a beta blocker in there, especially because my pulse is staying pretty high. So metoprolol, I've responded to that well before. Just throw me on that. And he's like, fine, I'll just write the prescription. I'm like, great. But when we were having the conversation about my knee, he was examining my knee, and he's checking the range of motion and stuff, and he's like, well, I don't think it's broken. I don't think you broke your leg. I'm like, yeah, no, we're in agreement there. Because, unless if it's anything more than a hairline fracture, when you broke a leg.
Right.
You're not walking around, for one thing.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's like, so I could have, then he says, I could have you get an x-ray of it. But that won't show me anything, because, that only shows me the bone. Like, yeah, I understand. I was like, but I could have you get an x-ray, I just don't think it'll do any good.
Then let's not.
Okay. So what are the other options? He says, well, I think I'd like to get an MRI of your knee to see, because I think it's in your knee, based on what you're describing. I'd like to get an MRI because that'll show me all the tissues. The MRI sees soft tissue. I'm like, yeah, I understand. And he's like, but we could start with an x-ray. I just don't think it'll show me anything because I don't think anything's broken. I don't think you have a broken bone. And now I'm starting to feel like I'm in a Twilight Zone episode. Because we just proceeded to go back and forth with this whole conversation now where it's like, okay, no, we'll do the MRI. And then he says, yeah, no, the MRI is a good idea because I could send you for an x-ray, but I don't think it's going to show me anything because I don't think anything is broken.
Did he skip a groove at some point? Was there a noticeable shift?
Right, like the record scratch noise. Just we could get an X, and it just went on and on like this around in circles. Where I'm agreeing to the MRI, and he keeps reinforcing that I'm making a good choice because the X-ray is not going to show anything.
I can see why you like him.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's fine as long as I can just direct him. Once he has to make a decision of his own, though, things get a little bit, different. He's actually, like I said, my actual doctor is very good, and Eric is very responsive. I don't want to make fun of the guy too much, but I have to. Mm-hmm. Finally, he did tell me what this whole circle was about. The thing is, the insurance company doesn't want to pay for an MRI until they potentially might not want to pay for the MRI until the X-ray has been done first.
Oh, I see. You haven't jumped through the right hoops yet.
Right, exactly. But he's not saying that. He's just, and finally he gets all sheepish. He's like, listen, just so you know, I'm going to try and submit this. And then they might say, you have to get an X-ray first. But I don't think it's going to show anything. I'm like, I know it's not going to show anything. Don't start that again. I didn't yell at him because he's very sensitive. I don't want to yell at him. So yeah, we go through this whole thing. And finally, he explained that. It's like, well, yeah, you know, and he wanted me to be aware that if they sent me for the X-ray, we were in agreement that the X-ray was useless, but that we might have to do it anyway. But the insurance company didn't make a stink about it. They just let me get the MRI. So I go back with the results of the MRI, and now Nurse Eric has a nurse that he's training. So now I've got 2 Nurse Erics in the room going over the results of the MRI with me. And they have the verbal report from the MRI technician. I guess MRI technician is still called a radiologist, I believe.
Oh, sure, why not?
So that they have, I believe. Anyway, they have the narrative report. They're not looking at the actual MRI.
Mm-hmm.
And Nurse Eric is reading it to me. And he's going over it point by point, which is very helpful because I'm just like absorbing it all. And he, at one point, they get to the word, him and his nurse in training, they get to the word tendinosis. It's like, oh yeah, you've got signs of tendinosis.
Uh-huh.
And she looks at him, the trainee looks at him, and he looks at her, like, is that a misspelling? And they're like, wait, hold on one second. And then they take out their phones, and they're looking up the word tendinosis. I'm like, that's acute, chronic, or structural damage. You know, it's not inflammation. I said that. I'm like, isn't that acute or chronic or structural damage? It's happened over time. That's wear and tear. My knee is 40 years old. It's wearing out. And then they both look at their phone. Oh yeah, you're pretty smart. And then they get to the word subluxation.
Oh.
Because technically I don't have a dislocation. I have a subluxation, which means kind of dislocated.
Yeah.
With a fat pad impingement. Like, this is good. Finally, they're like, we're just going to send you to the orthopedist. I'm like, that sounds like a good idea here. I don't want you touching the knee. Because, beyond anything that's like general practice stuff, it's like, let's just go to the specialist there, Nurse Eric. I'm sure the orthopedist won't have to look these words up.
I mean, does Nurse Eric know there's such a thing as WebMD?
Yeah, but it says I have cancer.
Oh.
I have knee cancer.
Or
my knee is pregnant, one or the other. They call over the clinic to get me to see an orthopedist. Now, the pain has gotten so bad that I'm spending most of my time on the couch. I can't really walk around. I can walk for about 10 minutes before the pain hits. So he comes back in the room. He's like, listen, you're not going to like this, but the orthopedist, the one that's in the network, the one I have to go to,
mm-hmm.
his next available appointment is May 31st.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I handled that very well, given my current mental state,
mm-hmm.
in that I didn't start throwing punches at anybody.
Good.
Because I'm pretty much done with the whole medical care thing. If I wanted to suffer in pain and potentially die waiting for medical care, I would move to Canada or the United Kingdom.
Right.
Okay? This is not what I signed up for living in America. This
is
why I miss just being able to pay for my own medical care. Anyway, because then I have the negotiating power.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so there is this other gentleman in the office, Augustine, and he's one of the medical assistants. And he overhears the thing, and he walks in. He goes over to Nurse Eric, and Nurse Eric's assistant. I feel bad I did not catch her name. Not assistant, trainee. And he takes the referral. He says, can I try? And, Nurse Eric's like, yeah, sure, if you want to call over there or whatever. So he walks out of the room. Then Nurse Eric turns to me like I wasn't watching the whole thing. He says, listen, Augustine's going to try and see if he can get you in earlier. I know, I was right here. I'm the one who knew what subluxation and tendinosis meant. I'm also self-medicating at this point. The only thing I need you for is a signature on these papers. So Augustine comes back. He says, April 10th. And he hands me the paper, and he will not tell us how he did it.
Huh.
But he was, when he walked back in, like his jaw was set, like he had just come out of a fight. You know that look on his face, on
Right.
someone's face, where it's, yeah. Augustine is awesome. He does not mess around.
I have gone to bat for you, and now you owe me.
Yeah, that was it. Well, I told him that. I owe you. I told him you're my hero. He's like, don't worry about it.
I'll collect.
Yeah. So in a few days, I will go to the orthopedist and we will find out what to do about this whole thing. But I didn't mean to actually tell that whole story, but it is sort of entertaining.
It is.
I just wanted to let people know I dislocated my knee somehow. I've also had a slightly bad reaction to my new blood pressure medication.
Oh.
So, and I managed to catch myself a pretty serious cold while Tiny had 2 wisdom teeth removed that were infected.
You have the best fun.
It's been quite a week in the Tiny Angry household. It really has. Which is why I don't have much to talk about as far as what I've been doing. My latest obsession has been just, sleeping.
I'm really into sleeping.
Trying not to lose any ground on the stupid Angry GM stuff.
Right.
Okay. I'm at the point, well, by the time this goes out, this will be known, but I'm bringing back the Mega Dungeon.
Hooray.
It will be back on April 16th, which means as of when this goes live, I guess that's 3 days ago or 4 days ago.
Yes.
So, and that is something that I've been working very hard to do because people have missed that. And I've been playing more Horizon Zero Dawn.
Oh, have you?
I have put, well, I got a lot of responses when I started talking about it.
Yes, you did.
And I still have very mixed opinions about the game. But I looked at the time I've put into the game, and I have put in about 50 hours into this game now over the past month. Which is unprecedented, because I do not put more than 20 hours into a game. Okay, that was the main thing that kept me from playing The Witcher.
Mm-hmm.
Was there was just too much Witcher 3 to play.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and, I was not getting anywhere. Because you just keep getting distracted with subquests and monster hunts and all that stuff. But what I have figured out with Horizon Zero Dawn is that I have not really been playing the game very much. And from the comments that I've been receiving from other people, neither does anybody else.
So what game have you been playing then?
I have been, well, the thing, I have been playing, I have been participating in Horizon Zero Dawn.
Okay.
But I have not been advancing through the story quests to any great degree.
All right.
I've mostly been collecting all the collectibles and wandering around the world, and I haven't even really been doing any side quests. I'm mostly just hunting robots and getting really, really good at hunting robots and, building resources, and I have expanded all of my carrying capacity and gotten all the skills that I could get and all this stuff. I'm now about level 50.
Yeah, you're going to out-level the rest of the content, the main
I have
content.
already out-leveled the rest of the content, which does not seem to matter so much.
Mm-hmm.
Because levels, except for the fact that you have a tremendous amount of hit points, so when you screw up, it's not a disaster anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Levels don't really mean a whole lot in the game. And the game is extremely front-loaded. You get all of the good tools right at the beginning of the game. Okay, there's 8 different hunting tools/weapons in the game. There's 3 different types of bows. There's a thing that sets down tripwire traps. There's basically a harpoon cable. There's a little sort of machine gun type dealy, well, a shotgun type dealy. Yeah. And then there's 2 different types of slingshots. And they are all available very early in the game. So you don't get new tools. There are not too many different animal types or robot types, right? So you get used to them and you get to be really good at taking them down and taking them down in groups and say, okay, I got to take down this one first. And if I take down this one this way, it'll weaken these 2. And, and that's the fun part. But people have been praising this game as a really, really well-designed game. And taking umbrage with the fact that I called it a very shallowly designed game. And here's the thing. It is a fun activity to play. It is a fun sandbox to play in. And the people who designed that game didn't know what the hell to do with it. Because most of the quests in the game are extremely dull and shallow. I mean, most of them involve, like, basically either go hunt a single type of creature. Go get that creature. Right? Or a distressing number of quests involve fighting humans, which is the least interesting thing you can do in that game. There's like bandits and stuff. And the remaining quests are tracking quests, where you go to a place and use your, Witcher vision, or I'm sorry, your hunter vision, to find the trail, and follow the trail until the trail gives out, and then you look around and you find a different thing, and then you follow, and then you find the thing, you examine it, and it establishes a new trail, and then you follow the trail, and then that trail gives out, and, 2 or 3 times. And then at the end of the trail, you either encounter a cutscene or a thing to fight. And that's like all it knows to do. So, as enjoyable as the game is, and this is my final word on it now for all of you people defending the game. It is a very fun pile of mechanics that these game designers did not know what the hell to do with. And the only thing that is keeping me playing it is the fact that it's a really fun sandbox to play in. But the game itself, like, there is no sense of progression in the game, or the progression is all over the place. The quests are really poorly designed. And the game designers they didn't know what to do with the stuff they designed. They designed really, really fun mechanics, and they couldn't, like, as opposed to The Witcher 3, because I will compare it to that, which is a very similar open world monster hunting game, where you really have to work hard to research the monsters that you're hunting, and then figure out their weaknesses and what poisons to use, and develop a really, really good strategy. This one is, once you get a good strategy down for a certain monster, you can just lather, rinse, repeat. And it doesn't know how to do all that research stuff, all the pre-quest stuff. So it's just, the most advanced it does is, one of the earliest quests in the game is, go get the components for fire arrows, which was basically teaching you how to use the crafting system. It's okay, now that you have the components for fire arrows, take down this monster who has weak points that are weak to fire. And that was the beginning and the end of the whole, a quest that involves research the monster and then take it down. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, I have had 2 people now actually throw the word perfect at me.
Oh.
Okay? That it is inexcusable to use that word to describe any game. Okay, there is no such thing. But no, this game is fun. I'm not going to deny it. This game has held my attention longer than most games. But it is holding my attention in spite of the game, not because of it. I've actually sort of lost interest in the story.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? The story it's like, there is a backstory. I know there's a backstory because, it's trying to push me toward, what happened? What destroyed all of humanity? And what destroyed civilization? I'm like, I know what destroyed humanity. It's standard Skynet. Okay? The robots went crazy. But they want me to read all of these text logs and, like there's dozens and dozens and dozens of, like, text logs from the world what was, and they're all dull. They are all boring. They were so absorbed in their world building. It's like there were 2 different people. There were 2 different groups involved in this game. This is the nearest description I can come up with. One group was obsessed with the world building, and so they wrote all these text logs, and they designed beautiful environments, and they wrote a story. Right? And they wrote a story, and they designed all the cultures for the 5 different tribes that feature in the game and all of that stuff. And that's what they did. And then there was another group that was really, really good at making the mechanics for, hunting and fighting. Here's how you hunt the monsters, and here's how you fight the monsters, and whatever. And then they took all of that stuff, and they threw it in a pile, and they were done. Those two groups never spoke.
You don't think they ever met each other, huh?
I don't think they were ever in the same room. Okay, I think the world building and story writing people were doing their thing, and I think the mechanics designing people were doing their thing, and then somebody realized that they had to do something to make a game, and they slapped the two of them together.
Okay.
There are game elements that people don't even use. I know, because they've told me. They're like, I never used the fast travel system. Like, yeah, I know. That's if nobody ever uses a mechanic, it's not necessary.
Yeah, it's not exactly a positive.
The only reason I use the fast travel mechanic is because you can only save your game in certain spots. So when I'm done playing, I fast travel home.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, then I save. Like, I spend all my time just wandering off the path, killing monsters. I don't, I'm not really doing the quests. I'm like, yeah, that tells you something about how well designed the quests are. They're boring and repetitive. So it's a really fantastic game that the developer or the designers, the story writers, the scenario designers, they didn't know what the hell to do. And the excuse is, of course, well, it's an open world, play it your way type game. So
right.
they don't have to.
We don't have to have a story.
And I'm tired of that.
Or anything going on.
Except I'm not, because I'm 50 hours in and only...
Clearly.
50 hours in, 50 levels in, and only halfway through the story quests. I've run out of non-story stuff to do. That's the only reason that I'm now starting to move the story along.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found every side quest, and there aren't that many.
Oh.
there is not a big pile of quests in that game. It's like The Witcher Light. It really is. Meanwhile, sir, I believe you actually started running a game, did you not?
I did.
If my calendar is correct, it should have just started.
Your calendar is correct, and it has just started. Well, I don't mean just started. It started yesterday.
Right.
Right. It's not like starting right now. I'm not running it while we're talking.
Of course, by the time this goes live.
Yeah. As we
actually,
record,
when this goes live, if you're listening to this when this episode drops, you would be able to watch or listen? Watch, right?
Watch, yes.
Watch the stream tonight.
Doesn't
this go out on Thursdays?
Yeah. So you would think I'd have all kinds of information for you about how to watch it and where.
You were not ready for the plug thing, huh? Sorry.
Twitch TV, the one tar. All one word.
The one TAR?
Yes.
ONETAR?
ONETAR.
I guess it'll be at the show. I'm still obsessed with that. Like it's 1995 and we have to spell out the www dot.
Yes, I was invited 2 months ago. Yeah. I know I've mentioned it prior to this. I was invited to GM for the One Tar, Steve CC, and a couple of their friends, otherwise known as Tiffany, Steve, and a couple of their friends. And they are all in Portland, which is a place where I am not. And so she streams all her game playing and whatnot out to Twitch TV, and I think also on YouTube, but I don't know the YouTube address for it. It's a simulcast either way, so wherever you get it. So the trick of it is that they weren't sure how to get me on stream, and I wasn't sure how I was going to GM it. But then I hit the brilliant idea. What is the thing I'm most noted for? My voice.
Becoming obsessed with things? Oh.
Well, that. Yes, that. But my voice, okay? And I thought to myself, well, there's no reason they need to see me. Because one of our issues was bandwidth, kind of,
Right.
There's no reason they need to see me. They just need to hear me. And I can watch the stream from here so I can see them. So that's what we did. I play the disembodied voice of the GM in a Star Wars Edge of the Empire game. The first session was yesterday, and I think it went brilliantly. I don't care what anybody else says.
Is anybody else saying differently?
No. No, they're not. See, there you go. We had an opening crawl and everything. I put one of those together, and it went really well. It was a hot start. They were under fire the minute the opening crawl closed.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and were kept under fire for about the first hour and a half of the game. So that was fun. I mean, you know, what they're doing basically is they started out in the core of the galaxy, you know, the core worlds in the Corellian sector, and
like you do.
Like you do. Well, no, actually, if you think about it, most people start on Tatooine. At least when George writes things. But no, so that was one of the stipulations I made for myself. We are not starting on Tatooine. So we ended up in an interesting location. I don't want to
realize. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that starting on Tatooine was the equivalent of you all meet in a tavern.
It is pretty much.
Wars games.
It is pretty much.
Is it really?
Well, I don't know about for Star Wars games, but for Star Wars movies, gosh, you can't get away from the place. That's true. If you're not on Tatooine, you're on a place that looks very much like Tatooine. Jakku, hello. Okay. How do we know where we are? Oh, it's got a different name.
Wait, what is
from
Jakku?
From the Force Awakens, the planet that what's her name starts on? Jakku.
Wait, that wasn't Tatooine?
That was not Tatooine.
The one
I know. You're as surprised as I am.
The one with all the crashed spaceships, right?
Right. And all the sand and the sand dunes and the sandy people in the place with the dirt and the sand. Yeah,
that
not Tatooine. No.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Point being, I decided we were not starting on a Tatooine-like planet, and so we started somewhere else entirely near the core in the Corellia sector. I don't want to give too much away because if you're going to watch the stream, then you'll kind of get a little bit of things spoiled and whatnot, and I don't want to do that to you. And I started giving them choices right off the bat while they were being essentially chased.
Mm-hmm.
And it went really well, and they ended up exactly where I wanted them. In exactly the sort of condition I wanted them in.
Oh, good.
They stole a spaceship. They flew to a space station.
In space.
Yes. So it's gone really well. I was really quite pleased. I managed to keep the pace up for, like I say, about an hour and a half. And then finally had to give them some breathing room so they could at least talk to the rest of the stream and introduce their characters. Because we didn't even do that. It was just like the stream started, the opening crawl played, and then we were in the middle of the game.
Oh. And
we just went from there for an hour and a half. And finally I said, okay, we need a little
res, as we call it.
Oh, very much so. Yes. And then I slowed things down enough that they could introduce their characters, not to each other and to the stream. You know how that works, right?
Right.
You know, some necessary business was taken care of.
Right.
And then I slowly ramped it back up from there. And now we are in a situation where they can't leave, but they really, really, really need to. And that's where we ended.
Very good.
Yeah. It's a little shorter session than I'm used to. We only get about 3 hours or so. If that much. More like 2.5.
And ultimately this is just going to run for the month. So this is just going to be 4 3-hour sessions, huh?
Yeah, 4 3-hour sessions for the month. 12 hours of gaming, and then we're done.
Wow, that is just not enough game.
Well, that depends. I'm told. I don't know. This is not official. Mm-hmm. I'm told a lot depends on how the viewers react to it and whether they'd want to see more of such a thing.
Oh.
Because they are primarily board gamers.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. Tiffany is very big in the board game sphere.
Yes, she is. And so it kind of depends on
also,
whether her
she
viewers...
sent me a very nice tutorial for how to make a scarf.
Cool.
back when I was learning how to knit.
That was nice of her.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
very
she's
nice.
Cool people.
She is very cool people. The reaction of the viewers will determine whether there's any more of it aired. But there is also a possibility that it might kind of be an off and on ongoing thing just for them without any streaming. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
That would be cool too.
That would be very cool. I would enjoy that.
That just reminds me of something, and I'm just going to throw this out there very quickly.
Okay.
But you just reminded. I saw a very interesting YouTube video.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know who this person is. Rocket Jump.
Rocket Jump? What?
Rocket Jump. But he put together a very interesting 15-minute documentary about how the original Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, was completely re-edited from George Lucas's roughs because it was a complete and utter pacing disaster.
Oh.
And how Lucas's wife, and who I cannot remember their names. So Lucas's wife, his wife at the time, and there were two other editors involved, and they recut basically the entire movie. They actually restructured the entirety of the first act and the entirety of the finale.
Huh.
And he put together comparisons with this, leaks from the original script, which is now all over the internet, and footage from deleted bits. And it's actually really fascinating because one of the most interesting things it shows is the power of editing.
Right.
How much the editor actually controls the movie. And Episode 4 actually won several awards in its year for its editing. For the way it was put together.
Huh,
so anyway, I just mentioned that because I thought you would be interested to check it out.
Yeah, I will.
And then other folks might be interested too, because I just sent a link to you in our private chat, so it can go into the thingies that you do.
The show notes, yes, they will go into the show notes. Yeah,
yeah,
that's cool. I like that.
Yeah, check
very
it out.
Good. Will do.
I said I would be brief, and I actually was. I pulled it off.
How about that? We're all very proud of you.
Yes, thank you. It does not come naturally.
Yeah. I got up Monday or Tuesday morning. I cannot remember which now because it's all been such a whirlwind. And I had an email from my brother. You don't know my brother, so there's no point in really introducing him. But he is my younger brother.
I hope he's not listening to this right now. Single tear rolling down his cheek.
He doesn't even know I do this. No, the point is the email I got at something like 6 a.m. It was actually a series of 3 emails that arrived very rapidly after each other. I had just about enough time to take in the entirety of the first email, which said, "Are you going to do this?" Which was then followed, "Nope, never mind, we're going to do this," which was then followed by, "I have bought tickets and made reservations and paid for a hotel room so we can go to Shucks this year." Which Shucks is the Shut Up and Sit Down Convention. Or Expo, whatever. Board games. And gaming and whatnot.
Okay.
It's in Vancouver, Canada.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I've been to Canada before and survived. I was not eaten by a moose or trampled by politeness or anything like that. In fact, I find I have sort of a defensive barrier around me that prevents any actual politeness from getting to me. So we're fine there. The show runs October, I think it's the 12th to the 14th. That seems right. So when you remember
Friday, October 12th to Sunday, October 14th. Can confirm.
Yes. Okay. Good. Can confirm. So you remember earlier when we both declared we were not going to any conventions this year?
Yeah.
Apparently I'm wrong.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to a convention this year.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
I was waiting for you to say we're going.
No, you're stuck.
Buy these tickets.
You're stuck. I'm sorry.
I as much as I would love to, other expenses are taking priority this year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He got me this for my birthday, which is later this. Well, is it later this month? Yes, it is one day later this month.
It will be tomorrow.
Yes, it will. Anyway, he did that for my birthday. And naturally, I thanked him somewhat sincerely. Because if there's one thing I love, it's people making my plans for me. But that's neither here nor there. I'm going to Shucks. I will be at Shucks. There will be no formal GM Word of the Week presence at Shucks because we will not both be there. But I'm certainly going to be there and be available for the saying hi to of.
Saying hi to. Okay. All right. Yeah. That parses.
Yeah. It does, strangely enough. So if you're going to Shucks, maybe, and my understanding is the tickets are all but gone by now, and they just opened up this week. If you're going to Shucks, let me know in the comments or whatever, and maybe we can get a moment or two at the convention to say hello. The interesting thing about this convention, one of the several interesting things about this convention is that unlike Gen Con, you take care of your tickets in the hotel all at the same time, and there's no stupid lottery.
You are never going to get over that, are you?
I am not. Because for one thing, they've limited the number of tickets. Only 1,800 people will be there.
Mm-hmm.
So they pretty much know how many rooms they need and what kind of space they need for that. So I guess that makes it easier. And you say, okay, there's 1,800 rooms available. I don't know how that works. But anyway, we ended up at a place called the Thingy with the Stuff. It's in Vancouver, at least, not in some subdivision. The Pinnacle Hotel, Vancouver Harborfront.
Wow, that's quite a name.
Yes, it is. It is also quite a hotel. I have looked upon it. There's a view of the harbor from a number of rooms, and if you're not in one of those rooms, there's a view of the rather delightfully landscaped mountains on the other side. So, this is far classier than any place I've ever stayed in, but that's where we're going. I imagine there will be some other activities either before or after the convention when we return back to Salem, Oregon. And, there might be a day or two when I can get up to Portland. And I don't know. I will, if I can, I'm going to go to Powell's. So that might be the best place to find me. But I realize this is April and the convention is in October, and all of you, including myself, will have forgotten all these wonderful details by then. So just keep an eye on my Twitter, and I will try to keep that up to date when the time comes. As we start this feedback section, we need to stop before we actually start it, because last week we had a listener, Jan, do some very nice stuff for us. He stated us out as a template and a prestige class. Was that right? Template and prestige class?
Yeah, I was a prestige class.
Yes. And in our merrymaking, we inadvertently might have said a few things that could have upset somebody. And specifically, we may have made reference to the fact that it and keep in mind, this was not serious. This was just, comedy for a laugh, whatever. We might have suggested that Jan was stalking us. That is not the case. We want to be very clear about that. Some people were not pleased with that, and I want to apologize for suggesting that might be the case or allowing that to be suggested or whatever it was exactly that happened there. Jan is not a stalker. He just pays very careful attention.
Right. That was exactly all the joke was meant to imply, was that his knowledge and memory of things we had said was very complete.
Mm-hmm.
Impressively so.
Yes.
And the thing is, we don't also mean to minimize the problem of online stalking. Stalking is a serious issue, or it can be a serious issue for those who have been affected by it. And I myself have actually had issues with it. So I certainly do not mean to minimize the issue to anyone or to imply anybody was doing so. I know the difference between being stalked and not being stalked.
Mm-hmm.
But so Jan, I also apologize, and I think that's all that needs to be said. We are grateful. It was very fun.
Yes.
I was actually kind of flattered by it. I love when people do stuff like that. I have a bunch of I have had a few things that fans have sent me that have places of honor in my apartment here. So I'm just flattered by it. Anybody who takes the time to put any creative effort into something, I find that really touching, because I know that takes work.
Yeah.
I'm babbling now.
No, that's fine.
Anyway, we are sorry.
Yes. We do very much apologize for having offended, if we have offended, and that was certainly not our intention. We're just fun, jokey people here, and sometimes the fun, jokey people do something stupid, and we did. So, IS Destroyer wrote in via email to point out that there is an article that has appeared on EN World, where you, sir, as the angry GM, get quoted twice, and that article is on the "Do we still need race in D&D" discussion.
I'm actually surprised that my name isn't like word filtered on EN World.
Yeah, well,
it just gets replaced with stars.
Yeah, it didn't take very long for the entire article to be written off just because you appeared in it. But that was only by one individual.
There was one comment who can't take a joke.
Yeah. That was by one individual and hardly constitutes the, 800 and some odd other comments that were made in the discussion on the article. So we will have a link to that in the show notes if you would like to read it. Did you have something you wanted to expand upon about what was in that article?
I actually, I've been going back and forth on it as we've been sitting here, because I keep like scrolling through and reading it.
Mm-hmm.
It is an interest, because the question that the article raises is whether the concept of race should be removed from fantasy games. With the idea of you choose a race. And it's not specifically saying like, should we get rid of the idea of fantasy species altogether? But it actually seems to be like part of it is discuss. Here's the problem with discussing this article, and here's why I keep going back and forth on it, because I'm not really sure what the call to action in this article is. Because like it was all sort of, it was predicated on Pathfinder changing the term from race to ancestry. And the separation in 5e and in the upcoming Pathfinder 2.0 between your ancestry as your biological birth and then your background as your socioeconomic upbringing or your cultural upbringing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's. I really, I was going to expand on it, but I really don't know where to take this discussion.
Sure.
Because, I mean, ultimately, the problem is really, when you get down to it, it's just the word race.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because in the fantasy genre, the word race has two combined connotations, which are species, that because, obviously, orc, elf, whatever, and culture, the culture in which you were raised.
Right.
Okay. And there has been sort of a growing move to separate the two of them in fantasy. And I'm all for that, by the way. In fact, I wrote an article about, you should really consider shaving off the cultural issues of a race, like the fact that all elves are trained with the longsword and the longbow. Okay, that's a cultural issue. That is anybody who is raised by elves in an elven, enclave is trained that way because that's part of elven life. But an elf who is raised outside of an elven enclave, it's like, say, an elf who comes from a human city and takes the urchin background in 5th edition, it would be very weird. In fact, I think the article uses a very similar example to this one. And I think in my original article, I used dwarves and their weapon training, but it's the same thing. That it would be really weird for a street urchin elf who was raised in a human city to have training with a weapon so expensive as a longsword or a longbow. Like, where would they get that? Unless you say that that's, like, magically a part of their race.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just genetic memory. But, by the same token, I have noticed that there is sort of a pull among players. And this is where in Endgame Masters, to sort of drop the idea of culture from their games altogether and just turn everything into this cosmopolitan, all the races live in harmony, and there is no elven culture that is distinct in and of itself. It is, you have your species that is an elf, and that gives you your keen senses and everything, and then, the elven culture, because nobody wants to be tied down by that cultural choice.
Right.
That said, like, everything I want to say about it is sort of half-formed at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there is a discussion here. And it is an interesting discussion on changing perspectives in the game and the roles that these various choices play.
I think I can fix it for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
You need 3 things.
Yeah.
You need your genetics,
Mm-hmm.
you need your heritage, and you need your background.
Sure.
And that's it.
Okay.
So you can have, you're genetically a elf, right?
Uh-huh.
But you grew up among humans, so that's your heritage.
Right.
And then within your background is the story of what exactly it was you were prior to your adventuring career within that heritage and with those genetics.
Right. So, and of course, then if you built like that, like, obviously backgrounds would be dependent on heritage. Right?
Up to a point, yes.
I mean, they're like, if you grew up in an elven enclave in the middle of a forest, you would not have a minor background.
Probably not.
Right. I mean, it's just not a thing that exists in that culture.
Right.
Right. And that would be fine. But
These are examples, by the way. Don't write in and tell us you can have elven minors.
Yeah, God, everybody. Yeah. But, well, the argument that I would make there is then what you need is heritage. And within heritage, one or two choices to, be more specific.
Right.
Like underneath your heritage, you would have a list, which again, we would just call it background or upbringing.
Yeah, could do that too.
Call it upbringing. And then you would say, human trade city or cosmopolitan trade city. And then underneath that, there would be like a choice, like, okay, pick a profession skill, right? Or there would be a list, like if you were, pick a profession skill, or pick this if you were a noble, or pick this if you were a street urchin, or whatever.
Right.
Right? Because, like, I think part of the problem, too, is all of this background stuff. It's like, it throws a bigger and bigger spotlight on the fact that your character's class, like, what is it? Right? I mean...
Yeah. It's your job. No, wait, it's not a job, because Druid isn't a job.
Right. Or should it be?
I don't know. Do you get paid to be druid?
Well, this is the thing. There are some classes that are clearly professions.
Right.
Okay?
Soldier.
If you are a cleric, that's your job.
Right.
You know? If you're a paladin, that's your life.
Mhm.
You know, you are you're an ordained knight.
Yes.
That's what you are.
Ditto the monk.
Mm-hmm.
Bards is that a profession or an avocation?
But the point is, as you expand the background, okay, like once upon a time, you could express your background with a skill. Okay, if I wanted to play in 3rd edition, if I wanted to play a fighter that had been a blacksmith.
Weaponsmith, armorsmith.
Right. There are craft and profession skills, right? And I was a blacksmith. And then but I was really good at fighting. And then one day my village was attacked and I took up arms, and from that point on I, declared war on all the uncivilized denizens of the world. Right? And then from that point on I lived as a fighter. Or whatever. It didn't take, you didn't need this extra expression of background because it was expressible in the skill system. And it seems like 5th edition had to put the background thing in to make up for how much it had pared down the skill system. And I look at something like how 13 Age did it, because 13 Age has very open-ended skills. Right? In fact, I think they're not even called skills. They're called something else. In fact, I think they're called backgrounds, aren't they?
I don't know. You have the book. I don't.
I know. I'm reaching for it. I just have to see the stupid character sheet. Which is as elegantly designed as everything else. Oh, there is no character sheet in the back of the book. Of course there is. Why would there be?
Of course. While you're sorting that out, I'm reminded of the curious case of Corporal Carrot Ironfounderson.
Uh-huh.
Genetically, a human.
Right.
Raised by dwarves. Currently a city watchman. Possibly the lost son of a king.
Right.
So how would you express that in D&D?
Yeah,
you really can't.
Well, again, you could if you separate race and culture. Because Carrot knew everything there was to know about dwarven culture and different types of rocks and different types of metals.
Yes.
Right? He was an expert he had all the knowledge of a dwarf.
Right.
But he could not. Could dwarves see in the dark in Discworld? Let's pretend dwarves could see in the dark in Discworld.
Okay.
He could not do that. Right? Because that's
right.
Right. That's
genetically
biological.
Not within him. Yes.
Right? But the other then I get into this other issue with this. And this is an issue that often gets ignored. And that is, the more open you make this stuff, the more meaningless it becomes. Okay?
Yeah.
There's already a fundamental disconnect between you and your character's race. Okay? And that is, with the other players at the table and the GM are going to still see you as fundamentally human. I mean, how many times have you forgotten somebody's race at the table?
Oh, every time.
Right? Because, until someone uses that ability, uses a very specific racial ability, it's very easy to forget someone's race if it isn't written on a placard in front of them. And you could say, well, there's your solution right there. But those races, unless they mean something about the character's behavior, then that's just a pile of stats. Then you might as well just, call it a feat. Okay? And that's the thing is, part of the reason that the races existed as archetypes in fantasy literature was because they were storytelling tools. You know, the elves and the dwarves, they had different outlooks on life, and that was part of telling the story about elves and dwarves. You know, so that when when a group was dealing with an elf, they knew something about how they would have to they could not stir that elf to action, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the elf was going to rely on patience and taking a long view and thinking things through and whatever. So frankly, I'm going to say, if you're going to separate race and culture to that degree, then just take race out. Just make everything human then. Get rid of all the non-humans.
Right.
Because that's what you're doing. Effectively, that's what you're doing.
Yeah. You're just smearing everything together into
Right.
an indistinguishable blob of numbers.
Yeah, and then you're not really playing an elf or a dwarf. You're playing a stats.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry. And if you don't like that, I know I'm going to... Because I've had this similar discussions before, and I have had major fights. I had a fight with someone who was an actress.
Oh, nice.
And I was pointing out that it is fundamentally impossible for a human being to pretend to be a non-human. Because you are still thinking through everything with a human brain.
Yeah, I think we've had this discussion too.
Yeah, we have. She was so offended that I was insulting the ability of an actress or an actor to portray something different. We stopped talking after that, I think.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, this is quite a fight starter. But this is ultimately, like, I have a lot of complex views on this, really, I guess, apparently. Sorry,
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't mean to babble about all of this.
No, that's okay.
I'm
We've
just
covered
thinking
some
out loud.
ground. That's fine.
Yeah.
You're allowed to do that. I mean, this is a show in which audio is useful.
Right.
We'll jump on. I'll leave a link to the discussion and the article in the show notes, which you can check out at digressionsandragons.com when this episode posts. Won't that be exciting and fun for you?
And you know what? Let us know what you think.
Please do.
Yeah. What do you think of the issue? Should race as a word be just phased out and replaced? Is it even meaningful to have it? Separate race and culture? Or should the races and cultures stay together? You know?
Yeah. Don't get in an argument over there. Just tell us what you think.
I trust our reader.
I think so.
not to.
I think so.
It's not going to degenerate into what it did on N-World.
Right. Minister G-Man, that's with two N's, says why, he's talking about episode 27. I have a chart. He wants to know, why don't RPG publishers support GMs better? I think it's because they don't know where the money is. But then they kind of have to do, because who's buying all the books? I don't know.
If you can answer that, you can probably do better than the RPG publishers that exist. I mean, that's ultimately... I have no idea.
Because numerically, there's more players than there are GMs?
Well, yeah, but... there's no good answer.
There isn't.
Like, we would have to either go with stupidity or insanity.
I just wonder if part of their thinking isn't that they need to support the GMs, it's that they need to change players into GMs. Because we know it's the GMs that buy the books.
Right.
By and large. Okay? So maybe their thinking is, if we can convert more players into GMs, we then have more GMs to buy our books, therefore we do better. Whereas if you just cater to the GMs that already exist, you don't get any new GMs and your potential market doesn't grow.
Well, your potential market does grow just by having GMs, because GMs bring players in.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. The argument is, how do you create GMs?
Magic pixie dust.
You figure that out, and you've got a game that will grow.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a question we weren't able to answer, really. We took a guess or two.
Well, I mean, like I said, the only answer to that is either it's stupidity or insanity. I think they just don't understand how to sell the product that they're making. They really don't.
Okay, we'll find out. Mm-hmm. Somebody will tell us, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Jolly Red Giant wrote in to the website. Again, on episode 27, he has a question and a caveat.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, how do you feel about the use of the term metagaming? And he specifically asks for the non-angrified version because he's read the angrified version. He's interested in the other version.
Which is your version. Which
I guess is my version. Potentially, it's just the Scott version. I don't know.
Well, the Scott version is not different from the angry version.
Ah.
I mean, I know people think that the angry GM is the angry GM is a character.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to deny that. But the angry GM does not have fundamentally different opinions on the game than I do. He's just a way that I express my opinions on the game. So if you've heard the angry version of metagaming, then you know my answer.
Okay.
So,
that's
what
fine.
Is your answer? How do you feel about the term metagaming?
I don't care about it at all. It's dumb. And nobody understands what it means in the first place anyway. So the way I deal with metagaming is to not deal with metagaming.
Mm-hmm.
I just assume my players are smarter than most pebbles of rock laying around in the driveway, and they will know things outside of the game, and being human, they won't be able to really keep it out of whatever they're doing anyway, so just allow for it and be done with it. And don't get your knickers in a knot when everybody knows that ogres react to fire badly. Which is the example everybody uses.
I think you mean trolls, though.
Or trolls, yeah, excuse me, trolls. But yeah, I just don't care. I really genuinely don't care about that metagaming word, its usage, or the argument about it. You can accuse me of metagaming, and I will just look at you and shrug and go, well, sorry. And that will be about the extent of it.
Why don't you tell me what I'm allowed to know and what I'm allowed to know?
Yeah, exactly. Where's the, yeah. Hit me over the head when I get in the door so I have amnesia.
Right.
And then hit me again when I'm leaving so that I can drive home. You know, I can't. Metagaming is, I mean, it has a specific definition, which is thinking about the game as a game.
And there is use in that definition.
Right.
Because the metagame also refers to all of the structures that allow the game to be played.
Mm-hmm.
Like for the social contract, or the understanding that the players are on the same team.
Right.
Right? And teaming up to achieve a goal. And that the GM is not competing directly against the players. Those are all technically metagame concepts.
Right.
Those are structural concepts that make the game work.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is because and this is why I get worked up about it. Because someone decided that metagaming referred to a player who remembered stuff from the monster manual ruining their game. Now I can't use that to discuss important game concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, the word has just become something that gets used to yell at
right.
That's the word that GMs use to yell at players.
It's like a lot of terms. I'm just going to say in general, in the world in general, a lot of terms. It's like somebody used it accurately and correctly in something they said or something they wrote, and then somebody else read that and didn't quite understand what was being said, but knew that was a neat fancy word for something that they could apply to something else and then make a big stink about it. You know, and that a lot of things seem to have gone that way. Metagaming is but one example. It's like anytime you get anybody who isn't actively pretending to be entirely absorbed in a non-entity of themselves, but rather an entity in the world of the game, then that gets slapped with metagaming.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it doesn't apply in most cases. It just doesn't belong there, but there it is. Somebody will drag it out, set it on the ground, look at it, shine it up a little bit and say, look, metagaming. And then everybody will nod their heads sagely and go, oh, yes, I see what you mean. Yes, that's absolutely metagaming, and not have a clue. So I just stopped caring about it. It's like, whatever. You think it's metagaming. Maybe I don't. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't care whether you do or I do. Maybe it's just a game and I'm just going to play it and have fun with it. And you're taking it way too seriously and we should all just relax.
So actually what you just did was give the angry version of the answer anyway.
Yeah, I know.
So much for that caveat.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, that's really where I'm at with it. It's it's too dumb a problem to worry about.
That, right? Exactly.
Okay, well, we've answered that.
We're really burning through this stuff.
This is great. Yeah.
Yeah. This is easy tonight.
And now we will be slowing down. Citizen Agent Car 16 wrote into the website. Assuming you're using XP, because you remember we were talking about how XP and milestone stuff worked and why I'm not really sure which one I do, because I just do whatever, because it's really just a game and we should all just relax.
Right.
Assuming you're using XP, do you award XP to players who miss a session? I don't know. Why do I care if they missed a session?
Right. Well, first of all, you award XP to characters, not players.
Right.
And generally, yes, I do.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, at this point, I award the same XP to all the characters.
Right.
You know, and the reason I do that now, whereas I didn't used to do that, is because the difference between one level and the next has gotten so much bigger.
Yeah.
In the early days of D&D, the difference between being level 1 and level 2 was fairly insubstantial. Mm-hmm. So it didn't matter that the characters progressed at different rates of speed.
Well, yeah, and they were going to progress at different rates of speed anyway, because nobody had the same amount to get from level 1 to level 2 or whatever.
Right, that was actually written in as a balancing mechanic,
mm-hmm.
sort of. Insofar as anything could be construed as a balancing mechanic back in those days. But nowadays, yeah, everybody gets the same XP just because I just don't want to deal with it. I mean, who cares?
Yeah. The bookkeeping is easier.
Right?
Mm-hmm. There's a second part to this question.
Okay.
What are your
as easy as the first part?
I don't know. What are your opinions on the optional rule requiring characters to spend downtime training in order to level up?
What an interestingly timely question.
Go for it.
Well, I was just in a discussion on downtime today in my Discord chat.
Amazing.
And specifically, I noted there's a big issue with the concept of downtime in role-playing games. Downtime being, if you want to call it a mode of play, which is what I really want to call it. Mm-hmm. Downtime is the mode of play where the players are doing the things between adventures. Recovering from their adventures, preparing for their next adventure, shopping, crafting. Well, it's where all that stuff would fit in that people are always asking about. Like, I want to craft stuff, or I want to run a business, or, can we have a kingdom?
I want to do the non-fun parts of adventuring.
Right. Or like, I want to go spread rumors.
Yeah.
Or, whatever. There's all sorts of stuff that can all be fit into downtime. Right? And it doesn't really belong in the on camera.
Right.
Right? And some of this stuff used to actually be a part of the game. Like there was kingdom management in earlier editions of D&D. There was creating your own magic items was something that was always addressed. And it became a smaller and smaller part of the game when healing became something that happened quickly and easily. So around about 3rd edition, the rate at which characters healed between adventures drastically increased, and the availability of of magical healing drastically increased. So normally the downtime activity would fit into the space that was created by the fact that, well, I need a week to recover from my wounds before we can go adventuring again. And then the wizard would say, well, since I have that week, I'm going to go ahead and, create this scroll or research a new spell for my spell book or whatever.
Right.
So it created time for downtime. The reason I bring all of this up is because requiring time for training would actually be a really good solution to that, where it would create a bank of downtime as sort of a resource. Like, okay, you guys need to gain a level, so you have to spend a week in town training, but also in that time, you can spend, you have a week's worth of downtime points. And then you can go and spend them on, whatever, like managing your business or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? So
I was trying to remember how we used to do it when I was a kid. Because, we had downtime when we weren't technically crawling a dungeon.
Right.
And it seems to me that there was a twofold problem with downtime. One was that you weren't actually crawling a dungeon.
Right.
And the other was that if you did start downtime as part of your game, it ate up hours and hours of game time.
Right, which is exactly what it can't do.
Right.
I mean, that's an important thing, which is why, like, one of the things I would argue if you were building a downtime system, and I realize that now we have gone completely away from this question, but if I was building a downtime system, one of the things is that it would not involve any die rolls.
Right.
Okay, like if you wanted to craft something, there would be resources to spend. Right? You spend gold and hours and, monster guts. And then you could just turn that in for the magic item that you wanted. Right? It would just be like spending experience points or spending money or spending anything else. Or if you wanted to spend downtime building, like building your reputation in town. Like you could just pick off a list of benefits. Like, sure. For the next session, whenever you're dealing with anybody in the town, you have advantage on diplomacy checks. Because, you had this great performance or whatever. Because you spent so many hours building a reputation. Right? Or something, stuff like that.
Right.
Where it would just be some sort of a benefit or item or something else that you could just buy with a resource. Because otherwise it is going to eat up so much time. Or the other thing is that the GM can just hand you information at the start of the next session. You just say, hey, I'm going to spend my downtime trolling around for rumors. Right? And the GM can come with a list of rumors prepared. Sure. It's like, okay, you learned this information. Do with it what you will. Right? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
But.
And it shouldn't, honestly... are we agreed that downtime occurs in the time between when you end a session one week and you start a session the next week?
Ideally, it should be mostly in that space, or at most the 15 minutes at the start of the session just to do that little bookkeeping bit. Like, okay, after spending a week in town, you all gather together, and Bob has this new shiny armor, and everybody's talking about Carol's great performance. Carol, you have this, this +1 on all diplomacy checks now, or whatever. Just to do that little bookkeeping. Or, and Alice learned this interesting rumor about, the Lord is having an affair with the other Lord. Whatever.
Right.
But yeah. Ideally, it should eat up no more time at the beginning of the session than you would eat up at the end of the session to hand out experience points.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right. I feel like a lot of it could just be handled by the players coming back to the table the next session and going, okay, I did this and this is what I got from it.
Right, precisely.
And that's it. That's all that's all it should do.
Right. And like I said, you can have, like, the GM can also use that stuff for plot hooky stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It would be totally fine if the player was managing a business off camera and that business occasionally led to an adventure idea.
Right.
Like, hey, while you were managing your business, your rare sword store, somebody came in talking about this rare sword that's in this dungeon. Hint, hint.
Yes.
Hint,
and
hint. Maybe you'd like to get that and sell it in your shop or whatever. And then the player could turn to the other adventurers and say something like, hey, here's an adventure we could do. Depending on how your campaign is structured, obviously. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of, that goes back to, like, the way the Edge of the Empire handled the obligations.
Right.
That were used to touch off adventures. You could use that stuff the same way.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Because, in terms of the question we were actually asked.
Yeah.
This optional rule thing here.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like since that's occurring in downtime, and downtime is essentially a part of time where you are away from the table and away from the game, that what you're doing is just essentially saying, we're going to do exactly the same thing we're doing and level up away from the game, and I'll pretend that was training.
You're missing an important part of it.
Okay, what's the important part? Because I have never looked at this downtime rule.
Okay. It places a restriction on when you can level up. You can't level up in the middle of an adventure.
Right.
If the session ends and the party is in the dungeon and they have enough experience to level, they can't level up. And that's really the only reason the rule exists. And from that standpoint, it doesn't matter whether the training is a day or a week or a month. The reason for that requirement is just you cannot gain a level in the middle of an adventure. Unless you can stop your adventure for a day or a week or a month.
Mm-hmm.
And go back to town.
Okay, that's the piece I was
missing. From that
missing.
respect, I guess since I should render an opinion, I am fully in support of that rule. I don't like players leveling up in the middle of adventures.
So last week we talked about the idea of starting a book club sort of thing, where you and I read the same book and then we come back in, what is it, a month? 4 weeks? 4 weeks, we'll say.
Yeah, 4 weeks.
And we will, having read the book, we will talk about said book. And then if the people listening at home want to follow along with us, maybe read the same books we're reading and whatnot, we will provide a link in the show that announces the book to that book on Amazon.
Right.
Okay.
That sounds reasonable.
Okay.
I actually vaguely remember having this discussion.
Excellent. I'm glad your memory is starting to function slightly better when it comes to these things. Now there's a variety of formats in which a book could be available. It could be hardback, could be paperback, could be what do they call that thing where the ebook version,
right,
the electronic book for like your Kindles or your Nooks or your whatevers. And also as an audio recording.
Right.
Now that's not going to be the case for every book, obviously. And in general, I will try to link to the least expensive, actual book version of whatever book we're reading.
Well, and I gotta assume that people are smart enough to buy the version that suits their reading style and wallet.
Correct, and they're
once you have the title, you should be able to figure it out from there.
and their time investment, that kind of stuff. Right, you are correct. But where possible, I will try to link to the least expensive actual book version. We don't care what format you read in.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Or language.
Or language. That doesn't matter either.
Should be a language you understand. I find that makes it easier.
Yeah, that does. That tends to be a little simpler. But one of the things we would like to have you folks do, if you're interested in doing so, is in fact read along with us. But also in the intervening, and this is going to be tricky because of the way all this is timed.
Mm-hmm.
In the intervening between when we start and when we finish the book, have you guys, throw up comments and whatnot in the relevant episode?
Well, I actually just realized that this sort of... Oh, no, it doesn't. I was going to say this works out good for us because we get an extra 2 weeks to read it.
No, we don't.
But we don't because we have to discuss it in 4 weeks.
Right. Yeah. You guys will have... See, everybody gets 4 weeks. Our 4 weeks just starts 2 weeks earlier than your guys's. And that's gonna leave you, reasonably speaking, 2 weeks of commentary time.
Right.
All right. Which we will try to incorporate into our discussion of the book, I think. We'll see how it works the first time. This whole process will probably get adjusted. But the idea is just to have a good time reading a book that we can all kind of talk about and discuss. Maybe you expand your horizons. Maybe we expand our horizons. We read outside of the typical genres that we usually read, that kind of stuff. So this is meant to be fun and should not cause anybody high blood pressure or heart attacks or anything like that.
Too late. The homework is already giving me high blood pressure.
I know.
I'm allowed to skip the foreword, right? John Romero?
No, you're not allowed to skip the foreword. You have to read the book front to back.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Like the
all
copyright information and the...
the words.
I quit. I'm not doing this show anymore.
Too bad. You're stuck. We're 30 episodes in. You can't quit.
I can quit.
No.
All I have to do is uninstall Discord.
Yeah, and then I show up at your door with recording equipment.
Oh, crap. You do know where I live.
I do. All right.
You're never coming back here.
Right. So let's talk about the book we have selected for the first experiment. We've decided to sort of keep things close to home. So it should theoretically be a book of general interest to everybody who currently listens to the show. That is not always going to be the case in future stuff. Like I said, we're going to attempt to read a bit outside of our genre and comfort zones as we go along. Sometimes we'll be where we want to be. Sometimes we'll be where we don't want to be. It just kind of depends on what book it comes up with and looks interesting to us. We're going to start with Empire of Imagination, subtitled Gary Gygax and the Birth of Dungeons and Dragons, by Michael Witwer. This is a book that was published in 2015, I believe.
That's correct.
First published 2015. Yes, there it is. By Bloomsbury Books. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Because I can't find the page that says that. There it is. Bloomsbury Books. And it is just exactly what it says it is. It is the history, the biography of Gary Gygax and the game.
Right.
So we thought that might be an interesting place to start in. It is reasonably well reviewed. And I have not read it before. Have you read it before?
I have not read it before. It has actually been sitting on my bookshelf for some time being not read.
Okay.
I think I read 2 chapters in.
Oh, okay.
But I will restart from the beginning.
All right. I assume it's been a while.
Yeah, it has been quite a while.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. If you have already read this book, that's fine. Maybe you would like to reread it along with us. That is certainly a thing which you could do.
Now,
go ahead.
We will not be discussing this periodically throughout the month. The discussion will be at the end of the month, correct?
Right. It will be at the end of the 4 weeks.
Mhm.
And yeah, pretty much. If you don't hear this episode, you're going to be really confused when we get 4 weeks down the road and are suddenly reviewing the book or talking about the book. So yeah, we just thought it would be interesting for folks to do, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I have no problem with that. If it becomes too much of a burden, then we will dump it. But I suspect that we will, at least between the two of us, read some very interesting books together.
That is the hope.
Yes. Now, along with that, you folks at home should feel free to suggest books that we might be interested in reading. I'm not saying we will read every suggestion. I'm just saying we will at least build a pool of suggestions that way that we can choose from.
Yes.
And we will be adding our own particular preferences in books into the pool as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that is essentially the nature of the game right at the moment.
Okay. Sounds good.
Anything in particular to add?
Have we picked a book yet?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That is what we have just done.
I kid.
It's the medication. I know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
snuffle into the microphone for emphasis.
Right. I'm going to see if I can somehow create a small group on either Goodreads or Amazon that will list the books we've read.
Ooh.
And allow folks to go in and comment on them there if they so choose. But that's not something I'm going to worry about right away.
You use that Goodreads thing, don't
you? I do. I keep track of all my books and things that I read. Not as assiduously as I did last year, but then last year was a reading challenge I chose to participate in. So it was 100 books in a year.
I should start tracking my books on Goodreads so that everybody can know how slowly I read.
There you go. But yeah, I'll see about starting a group on there. We can keep track of things and people can jump in and do whatever. So at least if you can't listen to the episode on the day that we announce a new book, and we will announce the new book read once we have finished discussing the book we just finished. So that episode will contain both the discussion of the book we finished and the next book in the line. But anyway, if you can't listen to the episode, at least you can check the Goodreads or the Amazon group and see what the current book is. There, I said that. That is a thing which we have done. We are now committed. We cannot turn back.
Well, until this episode goes live, technically we could delete this whole part of the episode.
It's not going to happen. So anyway, is there anything else you want to discuss? No? Good. Because it's the end of time.